Flight attendants, do you generally know when a couple is joining the Mile High Club? How often does it happen and how do you handle it? Ex-flight attendant here, and once when I was standing at the very back of the cabin looking out for call bells etc. It was a night flight so most passengers were sleeping. The light was low but some movement caught my eye. There was a couple under blankets on the very last row, and I could see that the blanket was moving rhythmically up and down. I figured out very quickly that the lady was giving her fella a hand job, so I did what any self-respecting flight attendant would do and told the other crew to have a look too. We all had a peek and then burst out into fits of giggles in the aft galley. Haha, that's the way to handle it. Everybody wins. Regional FA here. People sneaking discreetly into the lav happens every now and then. I wouldn't say it's a weekly event, or even monthly, but really just every so often. It's pretty obvious when people disappear one at a time. You see two empty seats where a flirty couple was sitting, and an occupied lav, and assume the guy isn't in there with a girl to help her through a bout of motion sickness. I generally don't care enough to do anything about it as long as they're discreet and don't stay in there for a year. If you're going to do it, make it snappy. Other people need to pee. I've had people ask me if they could go to the lav together. I just tell them no because I don't want to be implicated in any of that. I think you can get into far more trouble fooling around in your seat area. Don't bother putting a blanket down to hide the handy or finger blasting in progress. We can tell. If you get a salty but old senior mama, she'll probably call the pilots and have her meet the plane to bust you for indecent exposure. Planes are nasty though. I don't want to join the MHC, though I do understand the mystique for people who aren't on planes all the time. Just keep in mind that all the surfaces and the lava are cleaned dubiously at best, and the smell from the blue goo can be pretty aggressive. Hello, ex-flight attendant here. I used to work for Qantas, Australia's biggest, in terms of fleet size, and most well-known airline companies. It's largely going to depend on the airplane that the passengers are boarding. For example, anything from a 747 to the A830 is going to be quite hard for me and my co-workers to really track down any new Mile High Club joiners. Those airplanes are big in terms of walking space, therefore there's more area for all the flight attendants to patrol. This naturally leaves bigger gaps in patrol dead zones for people to have sex. The hardest thing is to be able to mount each other, since all seats have to be built to a certain height for safety measures, mainly visibility. On smaller class planes such as the A320 or even a 757-200, it's going to be a bit harder, since there's less space for flight attendants on patrol to cover, and you'll generally be closer packed to the other passengers. It should be obvious that the best place to get away with the act on any plane is towards the back. The only problem comes when there's high bathroom traffic and people are waiting to use the facilities. First class is another story however. There you can request privacy, and you get beds to sleep in, making it a lot easier to position yourself correctly. The one experience I'll probably never forget is on a flight from Australia to Vietnam. A young couple were very frisky with one another since the beginning of the trip. Turns out it was their honeymoon trip. Well, some of the flight attendants decided to give the newlyweds a banquet full of goodies that we all put together. We included goods that are usually reserved for the flight staff. Pre-packed cakes, beers, junk food and other sundries. Anyway, Debbie goes down to their row with this nice basket with all the goods in it, and we're all watching from the flight attendant service wait area. Big smiles on our faces. She reaches their row, at the far end, pretty much at the back. She turns to them, jumps, says something to them, bows a couple of times and walks briskly back towards the rest of us. Turns out the missus was giving the mister a nice job of blows. We all teared up from having to hold our laughter in so hard, and asked her what her reaction said. Good ole Deb said her brain short-circuited and all she managed to say was, "Oh, lovely penis, sir. This is a gift on behalf of the staff for you and your wife. Thanks, bye." That is one lucky dude. Blow job, nice compliment, and a gift basket. I want a day like that. Flight attendant here. I haven't yet had to deal with this. However, last week I stepped into the lab and saw some guy had jerked off and left the results for us to find. That was gross. I work in Starbucks and we often find blood splatters on the floor from the addicts that use our bathroom to shoot up. Cleaning up other people's bodily fluids is always fun. My mom was a flight attendant in the late 80s and 90s. She said it did happen more than once during flights she was on, and it was obvious as heck. It also presented risks, as it was unsafe for passengers to be in the bathroom during landing. So sometimes she or one of her co-workers would have to knock on the bathroom door to request that the people inside return to their seats. She would also have to stay at the door and make sure they did this. Once she had to do this and a burly biker dude came out of the bathroom, followed shortly after by another burly biker dude. I can generally tell because the poker-faced man will exit first to check to see if the coast is clear, followed by a giggly woman. I think about them when I am alone in my hotel room and masturbate in shame while crying. Or you never masturbate alone, it's okay. Flight attendant here. Okay, so yes, 95% the time it's very obvious. I mean, come on. Sex in a public plane. On large commercial planes it can go unnoticed, but as soon as people take their time in the toilets it can become a security hazard, so we then watch out for those people and it soon becomes obvious what they've been up to. Not a flight attendant, but one of my teachers in high school was, and we asked her about this very question. She basically said it depends on the person and the flight. If the flight attendant is in butthole they might tell the captain to call authorities to the gate. My teacher said she never did that though, since she's not a bee, I guess. She did however say that on the longer flights, international, she used to catch people under blankets, and pretty much as long they weren't being too loud she didn't care. She told me one time, when she was passing out a post-meal snack, a couple was on the ground and had constructed a fort to frickin' blanket across the seats and pillows to block the view, and she said she just threw some peanuts into their fort and kept walking. Here's your nuts. Those are some nuts. Here's your nuts. Edit. Thanks for the gold. From afar, I only saw it once. The rest of my crew were offended out and wanted to knock on the door and ask them to leave, but did nothing about it. When they were done, the guy walked out first, and I was standing in the galley, and gave him a big ole grin. I could see the girl behind him, still pulling her dress down. When she came out, she made up an embarrassed and fumbly excuse about not feeling well and his coming back to help her. I asked if she needed ginger ale if her stomach was upset. She declined and walked off. The other fuzz gossiped bitched about it for the rest of the flight, but I say go for it. Have fun, have all the sex when and wherever you can. Just know that half of the time those lavs are cleaned half-assed at best. If you're getting all naked and sweaty in there, you probably have poop on you somewhere. Actual FA here. Yes, I have seen things happen, like a couple trying to be cheeky under the blanket. Otherwise, my jump seat is right next to the toilets, and unless it's a parent-child, I will stop multiple people from entering together. Airplanes are filthy and never properly cleaned. If you're gonna do the dirty, get a private plane, or date a pilot. I was on a plane. I don't know another way to start this story other than the bleeding obvious, and a woman walked past me and into the restroom. It was a real quiet flight and I was sat probably 3 rows from the back, and there was maybe 6 people in the back, 5 or so rows in total. It was that quiet, 2 of which were stewardesses. Anywho, woman gets into restroom, doesn't lock door. Stewardess turns around as she does. A guy walks past into the restroom too. Stewardess turns back around, smiles and eye rolls. Woman walks past first, sits down, followed by the guy at least 5 minutes later if not more. I'm not sure if something went wrong or he had a post-pounding poop. Either way it was obvious they had done the sex. He sat down next to her after either poop or a nice self-reflection and he gave her a peck on the cheek. Smug smiles at the baggage collection too. I'm just happy they had fun and left Florida. TL. DR. Stewardesses didn't seem to care that a couple touched each other where they pee mid-flight, but it was a flight from Florida. The Florida part is apparently significant. I imagine this scenario to be one of those great in theory kinks that I think would get real and sexy real quick when she's face down over the chemical toilet and he's found his back out trying to shag his missus in a cupboard that stinks of pee, vomit and Windex. I'm a flight attendant. Never had it happen in the almost 3 years I've been working. I did find googly eyes on my safety demo oxygen mask though. My friend's mom was a FA on a well-known airline in the 90s. There was some turbulence on a flight to Saudi and the pilot put the seatbelt sign on, except there was someone in the toilet. Friend's mom knocked and eventually had to manually open the door. Inside she found a woman in a full burqa with one foot up on the sink furiously diddling the skittle. I'm not a flight attendant, but when I see an opportunity to save $40 on the end row, I take it. This has given me exactly one confirmed sighting of a Mile High Club attempt. It was on a dang big plane, but it was a red eye so most people were trying to sleep. I was one of those people. I was awoken from my light slumber to the sound of screeching metal. It was two rather large, and likely drunk, travelers trying to quietly sneak into the bathroom together. The tiny folding door gave them a fair bit of trouble, but eventually they made it in. About a minute later, the flight attendant, for whom they had patiently waited to leave the back of the plane, returned to her little end chair and buckled in. I chuckled to myself and waited for the inevitable confrontation. About 30 seconds later, much earlier than I was expecting, the metal door flew open and the woman tumbled out of the tiny bathroom. At this point the flight attendant hadn't even seen the woman's partner yet, but was still completely taken aback by such an abrupt exit. Seeing her reaction, the woman was quick to reassure her with some carefully thought out words. "Sorry," she said, announced. "It's okay. He couldn't get it up." With that, she spun around and returned to her seat. The man, whom again was still in the bathroom, hesitated. I knew he was in there, and the flight attendant was starting to put it together too. The man began to slowly inch his head out of the doorway like a skeptical turtle. He stopped at the aisle line to evaluate his surroundings before returning to the comfort of the airplane bathroom. He eventually gathered himself enough to fully exit the bathroom and finally address the poor flight attendant with a hearty nod. No words, just a nod. It was one of the most awkward things I've ever seen. It was the kind of nod you would do if you were tipping your hat to someone, but he wasn't wearing a hat. When he turned to walk by me, making 100% full force eye contact, I could see that his face was far more red than I had even thought possible. Straight vermilion. Poor guy. Really got thrown under the bus on that one. I'm sure she spins this as a funny party story now, and as she tells it he just sits there and politely chuckles while angrily mumbling under his breath, "That sure as heck isn't the way I remember it going down. Someone forgot their Flygra." Okay, I'm not a flight attendant, but I hope this still sort of counts, as I was 6 at the time. Anyway, about 12-13 years ago, I was flying back home from a holiday in the States with my mum. I was heading to the toilet, it was unlocked, and there was a couple just going at it. However, being 6, I thought they were wrestling. Leaving the door wide open, they were far too into each other to have actually noticed. I told an FA that there's 2 people fighting in one of the toilets. Now there was about 10 people surrounding the toilet wondering what the noise was. Long story short, it turned out that these 2 people were in first class and were demoted to economy, coach I believe the Americans call it, and me and my mum were given the first class seats. And when we landed my mum bought me a PS2. So that's a very memorable holiday. Snitches get stitches, first class seats. I have a friend who lost his virginity on an airplane. Came out and flight attendants were somewhere between a smirk and a glare. Consistently one of the coolest dudes I know. Freaking airlines lose everything, man. Auntie was an flight attendant. One Christmas she told us one story of catching 2 teenage girls going at it in of the cubicles because she had to take a pee break. They didn't lock the door. In the midst of it happening they offered her to join and give her the time of her life if she wouldn't tell anyone. She declined, I think. My wife and I have experienced this several times over the years. We have never been interrupted by an attendant. It seems like a small uncomfortable place, but there is a certain forbidden thrill and it makes a long flight go a little quicker. Brit here. I pick a seat near the front if I can, then wait until the meal is about to be served. So you'll have a food trolley followed by a drinks trolley. Once they get past you, you go for it. The staff are busy serving, and the trolleys block access to the toilets for the passengers. Then go for it. Brilliantly accurate move for the well-traveled mile higher. I don't think it is just me, but it never fails that I start thinking about sex and get super turned on during a plane flight. It's a combo between the boredom and sleep-like states, I think. The only time mile high is appropriate is if you are coming from or going to your honeymoon, or if you met on the flight, or you're at the Broncos stadium. My wife is an FA for AA, She had a charming college kid change his seat to be with a hot 30-some lady on a Chicago, Delhi flight. They started being frisky. My wife's co-worker politely asked them to behave. They were okay until after dinner, when off they went in the back laughed together. They were quiet so the crew didn't say anything. They got back to their seats and passed out for the rest of the flight. A few years back I saw a dude go to the bathroom and his girlfriend wife followed about 2 minutes after. I didn't notice she went into the same door but I saw them come out of the toilet together with wide grins on their faces. They obviously had a fuck but it was none of my business. They might as well have had a co-op crap. You know, I was on this plane once, and I'm sitting there, and the captain gets on and does his whole we'll be cruising at 35,000 feet. But then he puts the mic down and forgets to turn it off. And he turns to the co-pilot and he's like, all I could use right now is a frickin' blowjob and a cup of coffee. So the stewardess goes frickin' bombing up from the back of the plane to tell him that his microphone's still on and this guy in the back of the plane's like, hey hun, don't forget the coffee. US flight attendant here. I've experienced this only once. I was flying out of San and I was very junior, possibly a year or 10 months in. At this point in my seniority, I was still super new, but a little jaded because of low pay, furloughs, and being overworked on reserve. We were flying to Portland and at some point mid-flight I was putting a cart away in the aft galley when I saw a couple exit the lavatory together. They were giggling and the guy pushed the girl ahead of him in the aisle as they retreated to their seats. Without thinking, I grabbed the microphone and announced to the entire 737 ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the 2 newest members of Airlines Mile High Club. I crap you not. I was mid-sentence when I realized how stupid it was to say this. I wanted to reach into the air and put the words back into my stupid mouth. I had no doubt that a move like that could easily get me fired. But right when I felt bad, the entire plane erupted into laughter and cheers. The girl buried her face in her hands and the guy did a triumphant double fist back and forth overhead pump. The kind champions from the roaring 20s used to do. Needless to say I never made a comment like that on the PA again. And 8 years later, I have yet to be fired. My airline is pretty awesome though, and I'm lucky to be there, despite my stupidity at times. Now a tip from an industry insider. Don't even try it. The bathrooms are disgusting cesspools of scum and filth which rarely get cleaned. Seats, tray tables, seat belts, the floor, carpet. Pretty much everything on a plane is really dirty. When cutting costs is important, the janitors and cleaners are the first to be outsourced. And don't go anywhere barefoot on a plane unless you want an infection. But hey, if you gotta get laid. I'm a flight attendant and I've seen it twice. The first time we had a couple flying first class on the way to their honeymoon in Amsterdam. I noticed the bride's arm laying across the armrest under the groom's blanket. His hand was there too so I didn't think much of it until I saw the blanket become a tent. The groom stood up and hustled to the lavatory and the bride followed after a few minutes. I asked my purser what to do and she started laughing. We ended up sliding a note under the lavatory door and they got the idea. The purser had a chat with the couple after they came out. The second time was an intoxicated couple flying home from Vegas. I knocked on the lavatory door and told them that they needed to stay on the plane after everybody else was off and that the captain wanted to speak with them. The couple got nervous and started apologizing profusely. They didn't so much as touch each other for the rest of the flight and ended up sneaking out with the rest of the passengers as they deplaned. I don't think they're going to try that again. It's a huge safety risk having multiple people in that small lavatory during flight. We could hit a pocket of dead air or something and they could get seriously hurt. It's something that we joke about and it's a fun idea, but it's an extremely risky thing to do. Sure is some risky business. Not a flight attendant, but one time I was flying and had the aisle seat and next to me were this couple. The guy was sitting next to the window and his girl was sitting in the middle of us. Anyways, about an hour into the flight, they busted out this blanket and wrapped it around themselves and I could definitely tell she was giving him a handy underneath it. The blanket kept rising and falling and the guy had the most suspicious look on his face. Every time someone walked by, they kinda jumped a lil. It was the most uncomfortable flight ever and I'll be honest, I was kinda wishing she would lend me her other hand. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.